Example of how through all this, Republican members of Congress have largely stood by this president. As the Washington Post editorial board writes, from some combination of fear, coercion, and willing appeasement, members of President Trump's party, who should know better, debase themselves in service of his petty whims. Meanwhile, a White House spokesman said tonight that the president has begun the mechanism to remove security clearances from the individuals named yesterday. David Corn, why can't somebody who's on the left, right, and center have the same rights? Why can't the critic of the president have the same rights as an ex-spook, an ex-intelligence official, as somebody who's out there kissing his butt all day? It's the same government. A little freedom would help.
I think we need to take a deep breath here, because the amount of
I never take it.
I know you don't.
Okay,
I know.
so
I know. But you know, the
here.
amount of crazy that we've seen just today. Yeah. You know, we become normalized to Trump craziness, and today it's gone from 11 to 12 to 13 to 15.
The number of people he's yanking.
In terms of the level of nuts, I mean, he has now said Russia does meddle, but for the Democrats. I mean, that's a complete flip. Then this, the banana.
That's not a hoax. A hoax is not a hoax.
It's not a hoax. Now, it was a hoax. Now it's not a hoax.
So we'll make up a hoax.
It's complete. It doesn't have a sense of logic. It's lying. And then when you have Paul Ryan saying it's just trolling, well, no, it's not just trolling. They are doing this. So you have a liar, an autocrat, someone who talks as if he's delusional, all at once, and trying to distract us from the big picture. What he did with Putin, what's happening with the investigation, the failure of the tariff war. It's all about him dangling this craziness in front of us.
Okay, let's examine that word. I'll get to you, Yamiche, because you got to be completely straight, which everybody is in their own way, I must say. Let me get back to Susan Del Percio, because there is a even internal logic problem. He says repeatedly that President Obama, who he has a problem with his legacy, continued to cover up for Russian meddling in the campaign. He accused him, and he also says it's a hoax to say there was meddling. So what was Obama actually accused of in that context? Covering up what didn't happen? I mean, even if you're a total Trumpy, don't you have a problem following it, what he's saying?
Yeah, there's no logic to it, Chris. That's what's so frustrating. And let's not forget the first person to talk about rigged elections was Donald Trump in the fall of 2016. Just to address Republicans that may come and stand up to him, I'm very much looking forward to a new senator from Utah named Mitt Romney, who I think will prove to be a big thorn in the president's side. So while Flake and Corker may be going away, we may be having a brand new person to speak up for what's right.
Well, Trump, listen, Mitt Romney endorsed or embraced Trump.
It depends what day it is.
When Trump was a birther. So, yeah. I mean, I know what Susan wants. I think that's a lot of optimism there.
Well, he's trying to fill the John McCain slot at some point, but I don't think he's. I know it's hopeful thinking, but I'm not sure he's ready to take him on day to day. For more than 7 months now, however, Trump's legal team has been negotiating possible terms for the president's testimony. They're about as successful negotiators as the North Koreans. Anyway, Bloomberg is now reporting that according to Trump lawyer, he is a lawyer, isn't he? Rudy Giuliani, Trump would agree to an interview with Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigators if it's limited to questions on whether his presidential campaign colluded with Russia. To avoid the chance of a perjury charge, quote, Trump is demanding in return for being questioned that he isn't asked questions about obstruction of justice under a proposal the legal team has submitted to Mueller. Let me go to Yamiche on this. This is sort of like John Wilkes Booth will take any question except to deal with Ford's Theater. I mean, I'm sorry. This is about obstruction. It's the first tranche of charges that are expected to come from Robert Mueller's team, obstruction of justice charges. He says I won't talk about obstruction of justice because that gets the motive, and I'm not going to give you my motive.
Well, the president's lawyers, in some ways, as much as people talk about Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyers sense that there's real threat here with this idea of obstruction of justice. And I would go further to say the president's complex financial dealings, and as a result, they don't want him to go any further than this question of Russia and collusion. Because every lawyer that I've talked to in Washington, D.C., including some of them who rejected being the president's lawyers, they say that this is a hard person to represent because he can get in there, he can start lying, and then he can get himself in a real problem. But remember, Paul Manafort, there was a lot of issues with Paul Manafort. One of them is the fact that he's on trial right now because of money and his financial dealings. Let's think about the fact that we haven't seen the president's tax returns. We haven't seen a lot of the
We haven't
details.
seen it, but Mueller's probably seen it.
But there's a lot of details of the president's finances that I think they don't want to ask questions.
First wide open question, Joe. I would ask him if I were not a lawyer, which I'm not, but I think it's a great question. Have you ever, as a businessman in America, in your life, taken money from Russians? and when and how much and who. I'd go right to the money question and get him under questioning under perjury charge. Your thoughts?
Just like Watergate, it's always been follow the money. But in this case, in addition to money, I think that the fact that he is resisting answering questions about obstruction means he knows he's guilty of obstruction and he doesn't want to touch that. And he thinks that because he's been saying no collusion for so long, that he can keep on saying no collusion and just get away with it and that people will believe him. It doesn't make any sense. I don't believe he will ever agree to actually sit down. They keep changing the offer every time that they have a response, I suppose, from the special prosecutor. They change it. So now this is the offer today. But if the special prosecutor actually accepted that, they would change it. And his words are not believable. I don't think anyone who's been paying attention could believe anything that Donald Trump says. And so what difference does it make if he gets interviewed? He will lie. He will say things. Yes, he might be able to be charged with perjury because he's lying, and the prosecutor has the facts that will prove that he's lying. But other than that, there's really no gain.
I would like to ask Mr. President, with all due respect, did the firing of Comey by you, which followed the following events, have anything to do with those events? The fact that you wouldn't protect Michael Flynn, you wouldn't kill the prosecution of him, and you were going to ask for the personal and political and judicial loyalty of your own FBI director. Did it have anything to do with you firing the guy after he refused to give you that information? Anyway, just a thought. Yeah. That's the kind of thing Rudy would not like to converse about. Thank you, Susan Del Percio. Thank you, Jill Weinbags, David Korn, and Yamiche Alcindor.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.